Chapters 1 through 5 of Kathleen. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kirk Ziegler. Kathleen by Christopher Morley. Chapter 1. The Scorpions were to meet at 8 o'clock, and before that hour Kenneth Forbes had to finish the first chapter of a serial story. The literary society, named in accordance with the grotesque whim of Oxford undergraduates, consisted of 8 members, and it was proposed that each one should contribute a chapter. Forbes was of a fertile wit, and he had been nominated the first operator. He had been allowed the whole Christmas vacation to prepare his opening chapter, which was why, on this first Sunday of term, while the rest of Merton College was at dinner hall, he sat at his desk, desperately driving his pen across the paper. Forbes' room in Fellows' Quad was one of those that housed Queen Henrietta Maria in 1643, and though Forbes' own tastes were nondescript, the chamber still had something of an air. The dark wood panelling might well have done honour to a royal lodger, and a motion picture producer would have coveted it as a background for Mary Pickford. It was unspoiled by pictures. 2 or 3 political maps of Europe, sketchily drawn with coloured crayons, were pinned up here and there. The room was a typical Oxford apartment, dark, a little faded, but redeemed by the grate of glowing coals. Behind the chimney 2 recessed seats looked out over the college gardens. Long red curtains were drawn to shut out the winter draughts. It was true English January, driving squalls of rain, dampness, and devastating chill. The east wind brought the booming toll from Magdalen Tower very distinctly to the ear, followed closely by the tinny chime in Fellows' Quad. It was 7:30. Forbes laid down his pen, looked quizzically at the last illegible line slanting up the paper, and realized he was hungry. His untasted tea and anchovy toast still stood in the fender where the scout had put them 3 hours before. He switched on the electric light over the dining table in the centre of the room, and dropping on the sofa before the fire, prodded the huge lumps of soft coal into a blaze. The triangular slices of anchovy toast were cold but still very good. He devoured them with appetite. He lit a cigarette with a sigh of content, and reflected that he had not crossed his name off Hall. Therefore he must pay 18 pence for dinner, even though he had not eaten it. Also, there lay somewhat heavily upon his mind the fact that at 10 the next morning he must read to his tutor an essay on Danton and Robespierre, an essay as yet unwritten. That would mean a very early rising and uncomfortable chilly session in the college library, a dismal place in the forenoon. Never mind. First came a jolly evening with the Scorpions. The meetings were always fun, and this one, coming after the separation of 6 weeks' vacation, promised special sport. Carter was down for a paper on Rabelais. King would have some of his amusing ballads and rondeaus. And above all, there would be the first chapter of the serial, from which the members promised themselves much diversion. It was too late now to attempt anything on Danton and Robespierre. He picked up a volume of Belloc and sat cosily by the fire. A thumping tread sounded on the winding stairs, then a faint click of a large metal tray laid on the serving table outside, and a muffled knock at the oak, the thick outer door which Forbes had sported when he came in at 6 to write his stint. He unfastened the barrier and admitted Hinton, the scout, who bore in a tray of edibles, ordered by Forbes from the college storeroom for the refreshment of his coming guests. Forbes, like most men of modest means, made a point of honour to entertain lavishly when it was his turn as host, and the display set out by Hinton made an attractive still life under the drop light. A big bowl of apples and oranges stood in the centre, tin boxes from Huntley and Palmer, a couple of large iced cakes, raisins, nuts, and a dish of candied fruits ended the solids. There was also a tray of coffee cups and a huge silver pot bearing the college arms, flanked by a porcelain jug of hot milk. De Reszynski cigarettes, whiskey and soda, and a new tin of John Cotton smoking mixture completed the spread, which would be faithfully reflected in Forbes' battles or weekly bills later on. Young men at Oxford do themselves well, and this was a typical layout for an undergraduate evening. Hinton, a ruddy old man with iron grey hair and very red bulby nose, was a garrulous servant, and after a tentative
Sample complete. Ready to continue?